Medieval times. The timeline of the Middle Ages stretches nearly 1,000 years from the fall of Rome in 476 to the beginning of the Renaissance around 1400. The term medieval or Middle Ages refers to the time in the middle of two great civilizations, the classic Roman and Greek and the Renaissance. Key concepts you should know from the early medieval period are feudalism, Charlemagne, synthesis of three cultures, classical, Christian, and Germanic, chivalry, monasticism. Key concepts from the late medieval period are the influence of the Crusades, the switch in architecture from Romanesque to Gothic, the development in music from monophonic to polyphonic, courtly love, two great writers, Dante and Chaucer, two great artists, Cimabue and Giotto. After the fall of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church filled in the power vacuum. By 500, Christianity had spread throughout the Roman Empire and became the dominant political, social, and cultural force. By 800, a new Holy Roman Empire was established across Middle Europe, led by the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne. The Byzantine Empire was in the east, in present-day Turkey. The Great Schism of 1054 divided the Christian world in half, with the Roman Catholic Church in the west and the Greek Orthodox Church in the east. The economic system of feudalism prevailed across Europe. Lords and their vassals lived on feudal estates. The lord and his family lived in the large manor house, while his vassals or lesser lords lived with him or in smaller houses. They formed a bond of fealty, which means that the vassals gave their loyalty to the lord in exchange for protection and land. The land was farmed by serfs, who lived in much smaller huts and gave most of the products from the farms to the lord in exchange for a place to live and protection. This system persisted in Europe throughout the Middle Ages and in some places even into the 19th century. Map of the First Crusade, 1095. The early and late Middle Ages are divided by the start of the Crusades in 1095. Crusaders set up feudal estates in the Holy Land, killing the Jews and Arabs that lived there. Pope Urban II called for knights to capture Jerusalem from Muslims and regain the Holy Land for Christianity. The Crusades lasted 300 years and never achieved its goal. Some benefits of the Crusades were the new demand for Arab goods and increased communication with people from the East, fueling an intellectual revival in Europe. While the church had banned the pagan books from classical Greece, the Arab scholars preserved these works and they were rediscovered by Europeans during the Crusades. Due to contact with the Arab world, Westerners adopted the Arabic system of numbering, the numbers we use today, the concept of zero, algebra, and advanced practices in medicine. Architecture. Medieval style changed from the Romanesque or Roman-like structures in the early period to the Gothic style with pointed arches, tall spires, and stained glass windows of the late period. Pilgrimage churches were medieval tourist centers, stopping points during pilgrimages to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. This Romanesque cathedral with Gothic additions in the 12th century was the destination of thousands of pilgrims who walked across France and Spain to reach this holy destination and the relic of St. James. Pilgrimage churches consisted of Latin cross floor plans. It was laid out in the shape of a cross, with chapels off the apse, the area behind the altar. Portals, doors at the west end of the church that guide pilgrims toward the altar in the east, a symbolic journey toward the Holy Land and the rising sun. Ambulatories, walkways around the outside of the nave, the main part of the church, and a transept, the shorter length of the cross, which housed the relics. Relics were pieces of clothing or bones of holy figures and saints. They were housed in beautiful hollow statues called reliquaries, which were much more attractive to view than their contents. In the later medieval period, the innovation of glass walls and new forms of architecture led to the Gothic style. In the years 1085 to 1151, Abbot Suger rebuilt Saint Denis to let light in. Light was an analogy to God's spiritual being. This new French style became known as Gothic style. Three elements of Gothic architecture are pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses. Stained glass windows became a visual narrative for churchgoers who could not read. This window is part of a series that tells the story of St. Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral. Other cathedrals rose after St. Denis. Chartres, built in 1194 to 1240, surpassed all others in its perfection of design, stained glass, and sculpture. It housed the relic of Mary's tunic. The floor plan is a basic Latin cross, but with broader portals on the north and south. It still has all of its original glass. Chartres has 22,000 square feet of colored stained glass windows. Each depicts a biblical story, life of a saint, or Christian doctrine. There is a rose window over each portal, both the Son and Mary, the rose without thorns, and lancet windows, shaped like pointed arches. Trade and craft guilds paid for and built these windows. The Gothic sculpture in the cathedrals were carved symbols, stories, and figures of the Bible used to instruct. The jamb sculpture along the doors is ancestors of Christ, patriarchs, and saints. The west or royal portal shows the glory of Christ. The incarnation of Christ is on the right. The Christ, King of heaven and earth, is in the center. Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was built between the years 1163 and 1345 in the Gothic style and dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Sadly, a 2019 fire badly damaged one of the spires and the roof. By the 12th century, people began moving from feudal estates and small villages to towns and cities. Cities became vital. Although they were crude and filthy, its citizens were free from feudal lords. Newly written constitutions guaranteed freedoms. Universities were established for men, and a middle class emerged. Music. Early medieval music was initially taught by oral tradition until musical notation was developed by Guido di Arezzo. He created a 6-note scale in psalmization written in Guidonian hand to help his fellow monks remember the chants. In the Gothic age, music became more complex. The Notre Dame School, a group of leading musicians who gathered in Paris, compiled the sacred music of the time. Notable composers were Léonin and Perrotin, who added third and fourth voices to choral compositions. This complex music of the late Middle Ages was called cantus firmus and was the beginning of polyphonic music, more than one sound played at once. On your own, listen to samples of some of the medieval genres of music. Gregorian chants are sacred, religious, monophonic songs usually sung by monks. Organum and duplum organum are early forms of polyphonic music with 2 or up to 4 voices singing in harmony. Polyphonic means many sounds at once. Monophonic means one sound at a time, like if everyone is singing happy birthday together. Most music you listen to today is polyphonic. A motet is a short sacred choral work. Machaut composed motets. Melisma is a characteristic of a song that uses multiple notes for each syllable. Hildegard used this in her mystical vocal compositions. Troubadours' love songs were secular songs that were either performed solo or accompanied by a lute. Bernard de Ventadorn was one composer. Most medieval music was sacred, but music in the late Middle Ages started to become secular. Ars nova, or new art, was a type of secular song composed in France in the 14th century. It was sung in stanzas, used sharps and flats, and was accompanied by lute. An instrument played the lower part while voices sang freer upper parts in Latin and French. One Ars Nova composer was Guillaume de Machaut. Medieval theater was dominated by the church. Plays were short representations of Christ's birth, death, and resurrection, written in Latin. Some medieval titles were The Three Wise Men, Herod's Slaughter of the Innocents, and The Raising of Lazarus. Churchgoers followed the scenes throughout the church, and then later, when theater moved outside the church in the 13th century, actors would parade by audiences. By the 1200s, theater moved from the church to the town, but it remained sacred. However, the plays were now in the language that the people spoke rather than in Latin. 3 main types of sacred plays were mystery plays, cycles of plays depicting biblical stories, miracle plays depicting the lives of saints, and morality plays, the struggle of the soul between virtues and vices. Philosophy. During much of the Middle Ages, the philosophy of the ancient Greeks and Romans was banned as heresy. During the Crusades, Aristotle's works that had been preserved by Arab scholars were rediscovered by Westerners. Arab scholars also shared their developments in medicine and new philosophical ideas. As a result of this rediscovered and new knowledge, universities were formed as organizations of scholars to teach and certify lawyers and clerks. Soon, men could study theology, law, or medicine. Women would not be allowed to attend colleges and universities until the 19th century. Medieval university was strenuous for students, with oral final examinations during Lent. St. Thomas Aquinas, an Italian Dominican theologian and priest, synthesized medieval theology and the philosophy of Aristotle in his book Summa Theologica. He wanted to make a science of faith. His Christian philosophy states, reason does not destroy faith, but perfects it. Aquinas wrote that God reveals himself in works of nature and human reason. Nature leads to God. Courtly love was a code of behavior governing relations between the sexes at medieval courts, notably the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine, wife of mother to kings. In Andreas Capellanus's The Art of Courtly Love, rules are spelled out for this code of behavior, such as marriage is not an occasion of fantasy and tenderness, and woman is powerful over man. Literature. This philosophy of courtly love is shown in the poems, lyrics, and stories in the medieval Romance tradition, a long narrative in verse of chivalric adventures and courtly lovers. In music, troubadours were the lyric poet singers of Provence. In the Muslim culture of Spain, there was Arabic love poetry. Arthurian legends and the poems of Marie de France contained elements of courtly love. Marie de France was a poet, part of Queen Eleanor's court. Her poems, or lays, were some of the most influential of the 12th century. Dante's Divine Comedy is a 3-part poem reflecting his vision of the afterlife. Using the holy number 3, it's written in a 3-line stanza form called terza rima in 33 cantos of each main section, plus an introductory canto to make an even 100. It's written in the vernacular Italian, not Latin. The Divine Comedy is a metaphor for our pilgrimage through life. The 3 parts are Inferno, or hell, led by the poet Virgil, the symbol of human reason; Purgatorio, the holding place between heaven and hell where sins are not yet forgiven; and Paradiso, or heaven, guided by Beatrice, his ideal love interest from his youth. The Inferno is organized into a hierarchy of 9 circles, with more serious crimes punished in the pit of hell, the 9th circle. Dante uses the device of contrapasso, where the right punishment is given for the sin. Each sin's punishment in the Inferno is a symbolic instance of poetic justice. For example, the fortune tellers have to walk backwards with their heads turned around, unable to see what is ahead, because they tried to do so in life. He puts historical as well as contemporary figures in hell. Readers of the time would recognize the names. The pit of hell. In the middle stands Satan, who is fixed into the ice, which flow all the rivers of guilt, and as he tries to escape their icy clutches by batting his wings, he just freezes himself more solidly into the ice. He has 3 faces, and in each of the mouths is a man whom he rips eternally with his teeth. These men are Judas Iscariot, Brutus, and Cassius. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. The poet Geoffrey Chaucer wrote a series of tales from the perspective of various pilgrims about to make the pilgrimage to Canterbury Cathedral. His characters make up a cross-section of English society and provide irony and insight to human psychology. Reclaiming the classical past. The Italian poet Francesco Petrarca, or Petrarch, was a humanist scholar whose sonnets, 14-line poems to Laura, would influence the poets of the Renaissance. Christine de Pizan wrote poetry and made a living of her writings. Her book, The Book of the City of Ladies, featured goddesses and heroic women. Early medieval art has distinct characteristics. Before we view some examples, let's go over the elements of art. Subject is what the main picture is in the artwork. In this painting, the subject is 2 musicians. Symbols, theme, story are the main ideas of the painting beyond the literal subject you can see. Maybe the subject is a woman eating an apple, but you recognize the woman as being Eve in the Genesis story. Themes can be abstract, like friendship, love, or revenge. Composition is how the artist has arranged the subject on the canvas. Is it centered, for example? What is in the background, foreground, or middle ground? Medium is what the work was made of: paint, chalk, ink. Most medieval paintings were made of tempera paint, an egg-based mixture. Lines and shapes refer to the use of lines and shapes in the work. This painting uses very bold, dark lines to outline the figures. Color and light. What color palette does the artist use, and what is the source of light depicted? In this case, the artist uses a limited palette of blue, yellow, and red with touches of black and white. There's no depiction of light. Patterns. What patterns are evident in the arrangement or repetitions of the figures or design? Perspective. Do the figures look lifelike, as if they are in 3 dimensions, or do they look flat, like they do in this example? Technique. This is the way the artist created the work, in this case, with paint and a brush. Much of early medieval art had religious subjects and themes and lacked perspective. One exception is the Bayeux Tapestry, which depicts William the Conqueror's victories in the Battle of Hastings in 1066. This is an excerpt from an illustrated manuscript. Notice the elaborate handwritten text in the ornate initial letter O. During the medieval period in the Islamic world, art was restricted to arabesque designs, floral patterns, and calligraphy. The Italian artist Giotto was a student of Cimabue. He revolutionized painting. Compare Cimabue's Madonna Enthroned with Giotto's version on the right. Notice how Giotto breaks with medieval style with a new volume and vitality for the figures. The drapery falls naturally. The throne has more believable space. It has more depth or perspective. Some medieval characteristics, such as the gold halos and the inconsistent scale, still exist. Notice the use of perspective in Giotto's The Marriage at Cana. To review your understanding of the elements of art, pause for a minute and describe Cimabue's Madonna Enthroned. Now let's practice identifying medieval art. Take a look at each of the following 10 artworks and determine if each is medieval art or not. Number a scrap sheet of paper from 1 to 10. And now for the answers. 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, and 10 are medieval. 3, 4, 7, and 8 are not.